The stench of rotting onions was the first sign that something was wrong, an acrid, cloying smell that clung to the industrial estates of northern England, a scent of decay that was both deliberate and deeply symbolic. For years, it was dismissed as the byproduct of shoddy logistics, a minor nuisance in the world of fresh produce. But it was a cover, a multi-ton pungent smokescreen for a river of cocaine, heroin, and amphetamines, poisoning the veins of the United Kingdom. This is the story of a £7 billion criminal corporation, an enterprise so audacious it supplied entire networks of organized crime, from the sprawling council estates of Glasgow to the county lines that ensnare rural towns. It's the story of an empire built not with bullets, but with bills of lading, not with muscle, but with mastery of corporate law. And it's the story of the man at its center, a quiet, unassuming figure from a forgotten industrial town who ran his empire with the detached precision of a CEO, a man known to his underlings simply as the big fella. This is how he built it, and how one pint of beer in a foreign city brought it all crashing down. What time is it where you are, and where are you watching us from? I look forward to your responses in the comments, and of course, please subscribe to the channel. To his neighbors in the modest town of Winns, Cheshire, place caught in the industrial shadow between Liverpool and Manchester, Paul Green was just another middle-aged businessman. He was forgettable. He ran a cleaning business, had dabbled in hair salons, and, most importantly, he paid his taxes. He had no criminal record, no flashy cars, no ostentatious displays of wealth that might attract unwanted attention. He was the embodiment of suburban camouflage, a ghost hiding in plain sight. But this anonymity was his greatest weapon. Behind the bland facade was a calculating mind, a genius for the kind of bureaucratic minutiae that law enforcement often overlooks. Green understood that the true weakness in international trade wasn't port security, but the sheer volume of paperwork that accompanies it. He became a master of this domain. His first act of self-erasure was to legally change his name twice. He was born Simon Swift, became James Russell, and finally settled on Paul Green. Each change of identity was a deliberate severing of his past, a way to muddy the waters for anyone who might come looking. His strategy was one of corporate mimicry. He didn't just create shell companies. He cloned the identities of real, legitimate businesses. He would find a small, respectable haulage or produce firm, copy its branding, its letterhead, and register a nearly identical company name, often just one letter or word off from the original. He'd use this cloned identity to generate fraudulent VAT numbers and open business bank accounts. To a customs official giving a cursory check, everything looked legitimate. The company existed, the numbers checked out, the paperwork was flawless. This wasn't a street gang. It was a multinational corporation run with ruthless efficiency. Information was strictly compartmentalized. The couriers, often hired through legitimate-seeming job ads and paid in cash, knew only their pickup and drop-off points. The warehouse operators, storing what they were told were rejected vegetables, had no idea of the true contents of the pallets they were moving. The finance guys never met the logistics coordinators. Everyone was a cog in a machine whose full design was known only to one man. From his quiet home in Winns, Paul Green controlled a distribution network that was as sophisticated as any major supermarket chain. They didn't call him the big fella for his size. They called him that because of the immense, almost mythical power he held over their lives, all without ever raising his voice. A UK-based operation, no matter how clever, is only half an equation. To truly dominate the market, Green needed a reliable, high-volume supply chain, and for that, he turned to the Netherlands, the undisputed hub of Europe's narcotics trade. In 2017, his operation went from big to colossal when he formed a partnership with two pillars of the Dutch underworld, Barbara Reinbout and Johannes Vesters. They were a formidable pair. Rijnbout, a 53-year-old logistics fixer from Utrecht, was Green's continental counterpart, a master of paperwork and deception. She could navigate the labyrinthine world of shipping manifests, customs declarations, and transport insurance, making illegal shipments appear utterly legitimate. Vesters, 54, was the muscle, but not in the traditional sense. He was an old-school trafficker, quiet and seasoned, with a network of contacts that stretched from the ports of Rotterdam to the cocaine producers of South America. He didn't need to shout. His reputation preceded him. Together, they established the European engine of Green's machine. Operating from industrial units, they sourced staggering quantities of drugs. Cocaine and heroin from cartels, amphetamines and cannabis from illicit European labs. Their primary task was concealment. They would purchase between 40 and 50 tons of onions, garlic, and ginger a week from markets in Spain and the Netherlands. The produce was often low-grade, chosen solely for its overpowering smell, strong enough to defeat even the most sensitive sniffer dog. The drugs were professionally packed, vacuum-sealed, and expertly hidden deep within pallets of rotting vegetables. To complete the circle, they needed a seamless link back to the UK. This was managed by a team of UK-based facilitators led by Sohail Qureshi, a 64-year-old from Glasgow. Qureshi was the bridge. Working with men like Khalid Vazir, he used forged identity documents and, from Rijnbout in the Netherlands, set up UK bank accounts and front companies. This allowed the Dutch side of the operation to directly control assets in the UK, creating a closed financial loop that was incredibly difficult to trace. With this structure in place, the Anglo-Dutch pipeline was complete. Multiple shipments, each carrying hundreds of kilos of drugs, began flowing into Britain every week as reliably as the tides. Once the trucks rolled off the ferries at ports like Immingham and Killingholme, the British arm of the machine whirred into action. The journey of the drugs mirrored the legitimate supply chain. The trucks, bearing the logos of cloned haulage firms, trundled down motorways and A-roads, their drivers often blissfully unaware of the illicit cargo they were carrying just feet behind them. Their destinations were a string of anonymous industrial units and warehouses across the country: Wigan, Leeds, Sheffield, Bolton. These locations were carefully chosen, rented using the fake business credentials established by Green's UK team. On paper, they were depots for companies like Potfresh Limited or Europe Produce, perfectly plausible names in the world of food distribution. The system was designed for speed and misdirection. A load would arrive, be logged, and often moved on within hours. The drugs were quickly broken down from the main cargo, separated from their pungent cover load of onions and garlic, and prepared for onward distribution. To maintain the illusion of a legitimate business, Green's network employed a clever tactic. They would often send trucks filled with genuinely rotten produce back across the channel to the Netherlands. This created a two-way flow of traffic, mimicking the patterns of a real food importer dealing with returned or spoiled goods, further confusing customs records and deflecting suspicion. From these regional hubs, the drugs were distributed to other organized crime groups. Green's network was a wholesaler. They didn't deal on the street. They supplied the gangs that did. The county lines, networks, the inner-city drug crews, they all became customers. Paul Green's organization provided the product on time, every time, fueling addiction, violence, and misery across the country. The National Crime Agency would later determine that at least 240 confirmed shipments had passed through this network. It was a conveyor belt of death, operating with the cold, impersonal efficiency of an Amazon fulfillment center. For years, the machine ran flawlessly, but every empire, no matter how well designed, is ultimately vulnerable to human error. For Paul Green's organization, the fatal crack appeared on a cool October night in 2016 in the quiet, affluent Amsterdam suburb of Amstelveen. Russell Leonard, a 47-year-old British expat trusted by the organization for his fluency in Dutch, was at the wheel of a white panel van. Inside, sealed and hidden, were 57 kilos of amphetamine, with a street value of just over £1 million. His instructions were simple: wait with the van for the handover. But the night was long, and the city's bars were calling. In a staggering display of unprofessionalism, Leonard and an associate parked the van on a residential street, locked it, and went drinking. They left the multi-million-pound cargo completely unattended for hours. They had no idea they were being watched. Dutch police had been quietly monitoring the group for weeks, tracking their movements, logging their phone calls. The unattended van was a gift. As the hours ticked by, a surveillance team kept watch. Finally, in the early hours, Leonard and his friend returned, their confidence buoyed by alcohol. They barely had time to start the engine before police vehicles swarmed them, blocking them in. The arrest was swift and decisive. For the Dutch police, it was a significant bust. But for the UK's National Crime Agency, it was the Rosetta Stone. The paperwork in the van, combined with data from Leonard's seized phone, provided the first concrete link between a street-level drug seizure and the vast, shadowy infrastructure behind it. The trail led to a warehouse in Wigan, a haulage firm in Rotterdam, a bank account in Leeds. Most crucially, it led to an intercepted phone call. Back in Cheshire, a furious Paul Green, unaware his line was compromised, was recorded raging to an associate, "If that van's gone or been grabbed by the police, then there'll be f***ing murders." For the first time, the invisible man, the architect of deception, had revealed his hand. The mask had slipped, and the NCA now had his voice, his temper, and the first thread to pull on that would unravel his entire world. The Amstelveen arrest opened the floodgates. Armed with a direct link to Green, the NCA launched a sprawling, multi-year investigation, codenamed Operation Venetic. Working closely with their Dutch counterparts, they began a painstaking process of forensic accounting and surveillance. They followed the money, uncovering a fraudulent mortgage worth over £260,000 used by Green to launder proceeds. They meticulously unpicked his web of shell companies, discovering firms like Blackpool Fruit and Veg that existed only on paper. Seizures at UK ports became more frequent and more significant, including a combined haul of 450 kilograms of cocaine and heroin at Immingham and Killingholme. But the true breakthrough came in 2020. French and Dutch police achieved the seemingly impossible. They infiltrated EncroChat, the bespoke encrypted communications network used by elite criminals worldwide. EncroChat phones were the ultimate tool for secret communication, offering military-grade encryption and features like a panic wipe that could erase all data with a single code. The hack gave police a real-time, unobstructed view into the inner workings of thousands of criminal conspiracies. Paul Green himself was a cautious man. He distrusted technology he couldn't control, preferring face-to-face meetings and burner phones. His EncroChat handle, the ironically rustic duck farmer, was barely used. But his subordinates were not so careful. The network was awash with their messages. Investigators could read conversations in real time as a UK-based member with the handle FencePost arranged a delivery with Snow Gnome in the Netherlands. They could see messages like, confirming 150 bricks for the Leeds drop, and then cross-reference that with GPS data from a specific lorry and CCTV footage of it arriving at a warehouse. It was a treasure trove of evidence, linking the key players, the delivery routes, the concealment methods, and the sheer scale of the operation in their own incriminating words. The EncroChat breach didn't just give the NCA a case, it gave them the entire blueprint of the organization. With the blueprint in hand, it was time to demolish the building. In a series of dramatic, coordinated dawn raids in 2019, police struck simultaneously across the UK and the Netherlands. Paul Green was arrested at his home in Widnes. The man who had controlled a billion-pound empire was taken into custody without resistance, the look of shock on his face palpable. His finance chief, Stephen Martin, was arrested in Bolton. In Manchester, key distributor Mohammed Ovice was apprehended at his home, where police found nearly £45,000 in cash and a fleet of 3 high-end cars. At the same time, Dutch police swooped on Barbara Reinbout and Johannes Vesters. In total, 18 key members of the network were arrested. What followed was a legal epic. The case was so vast and complex that it resulted in the longest criminal trial in English legal history. The first of 2 trials at Manchester Crown Court lasted an astonishing 23 months, with the jury deliberating for over 140 hours. The prosecution laid out a mountain of evidence-shipping manifests, forged documents, covert surveillance footage, and the damning EncroChat messages that tied it all together. The sentences were seismic. Paul, the big fella. Green, the architect behind it all, was sentenced to 32 years in prison. His key lieutenants, Stephen Martin and Mohammed Ovice, received 28 and 27 years respectively. Their Dutch partners, Barbara Reinbout and Johannes Vesters, were jailed for 18 and 20 years. Even the man whose drunken mistake had triggered the downfall, Russell Leonard, was sentenced to 24 years. The total prison time for the conspirators exceeded 251 years. In his final remarks, Judge Paul Lawton captured the essence of their crimes. He told the defendants they were responsible for the importation of controlled drugs on an international and hitherto unprecedented scale, but he brought it back to the human cost, stating, "What you were actually distributing was addiction, misery, social degradation, and death. The corporate-style empire, so meticulously constructed from a foundation of forged paperwork and rotting vegetables, had finally been exposed and dismantled, brought down by a single, careless pint.